asked one of my kids, let's try out this plumbing thing. I mean, goodness, they can charge it really well.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. This is meeting number meeting number 4 of the Mayor and Commissioners specialized meeting addressing the Comprehensive Development Plan. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 2:03 p.m. I'd like to do roll call. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree is absent. Commissioner Ed Chernowski.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay is absent. Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
And Mayor Stan Mills is here. We have a quorum and are able to formally conduct business today. Thank you all for being here. Again, I'd like to recognize City Manager Evan Miller, City Solicitor Glenn Mandalis, and Lauren Good of Wallace Montgomery, our planner consultant. Thank you all for being here. We're going to continuation of our talks about the CDP as noted in the agenda. Where we left off was talking about the items in the agenda, and specifically we were talking about the plus comments and the other comments from other agencies such as the Town of Henlopen Acres, Sussex County, Town of Dewey Beach, and specifically what is the process for responding to each of these comments. So Lauren, I know you were going to seek some notes or something. Help us out again explaining the process, if you don't mind. We know that in the Appendix D, public comments, the plus review comments, that some certification comments are mandatory, I believe, while the others are just recommendations that we don't have to adhere to those. So again, if you don't mind explaining one more time for, I think Tony was gone at that time, on what is the process to make those appropriate responses that satisfy the state.
Sure, thank you. We will have to respond to the plus comments, and included with those are as you mentioned, the comments we received from the neighboring towns as well as Sussex County. So for this, we typically will list out the various comments by the agency providing them verbatim, just copy and paste, and then provide a response from the city in like red writing. So it's in the format of a letter back to them. As you mentioned, there are a few comments that must be addressed in order for the plan to be considered to be consistent and meet certification requirements. Those are found on the first page of the plus comment letter. There's only 3 items. The remaining comments in the rest of the plus letter are recommendations received from the various plus review agencies. So these are items that they recommend that the city consider addressing somehow, but the city is not obligated to incorporate these recommended change or update in the plan that you ultimately adopt. Are there any specific questions?
I guess one thing I'm trying to do think of is how to simplify this process. That we can certainly go through it page by page and make recommendations. I also suggested earlier that the commissioners can do that at home, and if they see something inside the recommendations that's not already captured in the CDP, they can bring it forward at the next meeting. I'd almost like to go that route, thinking that if we're all satisfied, or if I'm satisfied with the remainder of the whole CDP, then I almost think just a blanket response is thank you for your recommendations, period. I don't know if we can be as simple as that or not, you know?
Well, typically we do respond to each comment, and the response varies from thank you for your recommendation and leave it at that to a a more detailed, we've incorporated this recommendation on page number, whatever the page number is, or something similar, or we've changed language to reflect this. So I've gone through, I'm making comment capturing the comments from today's meeting in a PDF document, and I just went through quickly and provided notes to myself on how the comments may have already been addressed, either by the Planning Commission and captured in draft 7, that was the draft they recommended to you, or the few items that we discussed either during our meeting last week or earlier this morning that modifies any of those responses. Certainly I can highlight the certification comments just to make sure that everyone's comfortable with those, since those are ones that need to be addressed one way or another. And then maybe I could also just provide a brief overview of the remaining comments. These have been addressed, or the Planning Commission ultimately decided that no changes to the plan were necessary based on the recommendations provided. So however you would like me to walk through those.
Well, let's start off with the reviewing the certification comments, because they're mandatory.
The first comment has to do with written verification that the plan has been shared with and reviewed by the county and nearby jurisdictions. Appendix D has been updated to include the comments received, and so that comment it has been taken care of. The second certification-related comment references a table number. And when we were making some earlier revisions, we mislabeled the table number in the text when we moved it to an appendix. So we've updated that reference, and that's been taken care of as well. The remaining certification comment has to do with future land use in the annexation or growth area. So the city has map 5, which shows the potential annexation or growth areas, and state planning noted that they wanted to see future land uses associated with those properties in the growth area. So we drafted a map to reflect that, utilizing a combination of the county's future land use map in their most recent comprehensive plan, as well as existing zoning, which would be for the county, to develop a draft map so that we reviewed with the Planning Commission, and they agreed with the future land uses that we had laid out. So those are shown on map 3 in the draft that you have before you. So that item has been addressed, unless there are any changes that you would like to see to that map.
Or just for reference, that
Yes.
map 3, is it in the map section or chapter or?
It is in the land use chapter, so that's chapter 3, and it is map number 3, future land use.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it seems like the mandatory plus comments are limited to 3, and we've already addressed them.
Correct.
In there, so that's good. So I'm thinking about possibly accelerating the rest of this. I don't know if you would mind.
I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, right.
I do think important that we have the opportunity to review your responses just to all the other and so that if we could have that opportunity before the next meeting, possibly so that commissioners could say, well, I disagree with this one comment and I would like to see that added to the CDP. Is that possible?
Yes, we will prepare the draft response letter and send that to you along with the revisions to the other chapters that we've discussed.
Version 8, okay.
And then we will be prepared to discuss that at the next meeting.
All right, so that'll save us a little time today from having to review each of those comments. Since we're going through the appendix, if we skip to the back of all the local comments, the last was on page AD 21. To finish up the appendix, then we're going to the documentation from Henlopen Acres referencing the annexation. So we've talked about that earlier. Is there any further discussion of that? If not, we'll,
Kind of like a quick claim deed that happened, or,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, was that kind of like a quick
On
claim
the,
deed?
what, I missed the.
annexation,
Oh,
Henlopen Acres.
The annexation of
Canal.
the canal. No, it wasn't anything that was deeded. I'd have to go back and look exactly what the legislation said,
That's all right.
but it was a simple, it was more of just an annexation process. And even in an annexation process, there's never a deed that comes to the city. I mean, there's a private property that owns it. So it wouldn't have been a deed, but it just would have been the process set out in the charter for annexation.
And then we go to page AD 32, which is just referencing public comments, and that's some additional homework that you do, Lauren, I think.
Well, so here, the first part of that relates to comments that the Planning Commission received. And we are directing people to the draft number 5 comment spreadsheet that's available on the city's website. When you send this, set a date for a public hearing and open this up for public comment, our original thought is that we would track incoming comments in much the same manner, and then just provide a similar, either a similar comment to the one that we have for the Planning Commission, or however you would like us to address those comments received in this section, just to provide some sort of documentation of the comments received from the public.
Okay. Very good. Appendix E, adoption documents. Well,
These items, we would just insert a copy of the Planning Commission's resolution to forward to you, and then your ultimate adoption ordinance, once that's finalized. The Office of State Planning, once we provide a response to these plus comments, they will basically look at the certification comments and provide a letter back to the city saying that the city has adequately addressed the comments related to certification, and you are able to move forward with adopting the plan subject to governor's certification. The language is something to that effect. So we would just include a copy of that letter here, and then ultimately, once the plan is adopted and we send that back to the state, the governor will review it, look at it, and sign off on the certification, and will generate a letter saying that the plan has been certified as of this date. So this is really just taking screenshots, basically, of those various documents and including them here once they've all been received.
very good. I'd just like to review an explanation of how this has to be adopted by ordinance. I will have a resolution in front of us that we will be voting on at some point to set a public hearing for this. But ultimately, we have to adopt the CDP by ordinance. Can you just explain what that is? What does that mean? Are we actually going to put an ordinance in our code book?
There will not be an ordinance in your code book, Mayor. It's interesting, I was mentioning to you earlier that when I first started doing these, I would create resolutions for adoption because resolution, isn't law. It's a policy generally that you all have set out, but the code does say, the state code says that it has to be adopted by ordinance, which makes sense when you really think about it because we've talked about how the CDP has the force of law and the ordinance is the mechanism to kind of breathe that force of law into it in some ways outside of even the state code. So it's done by ordinance, just like you'd adopt any other ordinance here. You'll have your public hearing first, then come back and vote on an ordinance. Could be at the same meeting, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Clarification? Since it was done by, if I'm understanding you, and help me if I'm not, if it was done by resolution previously, so does that make the statement it had the force of law not accurate?
No, I think once the governor certifies it, that breathes enough life into it as well.
So that supersedes whatever we did?
I'm sure, but I can't remember in 2010 if we actually did resolution, but I feel like we did. And since then, all the ones I've been involved with, I've done by ordinance because that is what the state code says.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Appendix F is the index, and that's something to be
Yes.
coming at some point in the future. With that, that ends our review of the Appendix A. What I'd like to, are you able to put those up on the screen? Map 1, 2, 3, 4, all in order. We may need help locating these maps. I wanted to go over all the maps, see if there were any questions on them, and then we'll go to Chapter 8, Implementation, and then Chapter 1, Executive Summary. I pulled all the maps out so they're right in front of me. I don't know if they're embedded in different chapters or not, but that's where you can help us, Lauren. Map number 1 is the city boundary map. And so I'm looking for any input from the commissioners. My only comment on that is I'd prefer to see the boundary in yellow so it jumps out.
Here, if you wouldn't mind, could you give us the page number and site?
Yeah. Yeah.
Be on page 3-38.
Evan also has it on the screen, but 3-38. This is the city boundary map.
And if I may, just a note here, anytime that we've made a modification to the maps, we just add a line under the map revisions section. So that's right above where it says City of Rehoboth. Evan's pointing it out there, just so we can track how these may have changed since their original creation. So any items such as that you just mentioned, changing the boundary color, although it's a somewhat insignificant change, it's not materially relevant to the map itself. We just want to be clear in documenting what changes are being made.
Sure. Now, is everybody comfortable with green? Certainly easier to leave it alone, but I'd like it to jump out. No comments, so I guess just leave it alone. Map number 2, can you tell us what page that is on, Lauren?
Yes, it is on page 4-19.
Any comments? This is a state strategies map. No changes there. All right. We'll go to map number 3. Lauren, if you could tell us what page that's on.
Page 4-20.
4-20. This is the future land use map. And I think one of their requirements is it has to show the future annexation areas of what their future use would be if we annex it. Any comments on this map? Nope. Yeah.
Yeah, one quick question. Lauren, I'm assuming that Henlopen Acres and Dewey Beach are, they're grayed out because they're not able to be annexed, correct?
Correct. We were just using that to show the boundaries of those areas because they are adjacent to the city.
Normally wouldn't annex an incorporated area, I don't think.
Couldn't do it. I mean, I suppose there's some process by which you could merge. Towns have done that before, but you reincorporate, I suppose, or one of them would be dissolved and consumed in, but something like that would have to happen before you could annex.
Is that, I'm just curious with the question on the canal under review, does that make any difference with, what is that, the canal Cochrane there? Or,
The areas to the west of the canal are would still be considered adjacent to the city boundary. The area in question for Rehoboth, it is hatched on this, but it's hard to see on the screen. That's the area in question. So annexations would have to happen so that the properties that are annexed into the city are contiguous to the existing boundary. So you couldn't jump over parcels or create enclaves or islands when that occurs. So as long as the annexation occurred in the commercial area across the canal and then moved up into that more residentially identified future land use, that would meet those requirements.
So does that go up to North Shores? Then does that, the very end of the canal? Right, but if it go, that would be adjacent then.
I am
Could potentially.
Yeah, if we had the canal, you could annex North Shores.
but I think that's the end of our property line there, if you will. So it doesn't touch North Shores?
And what's that white area there?
County.
correct. So we did not make any changes to this proposed annexation boundary from what was included in previous drafts, other than to just mirror parcel lines and whatnot. But other than that, this is the same boundary that has been in at least the last plan.
But I see your point, Commissioner Gossett, is that if it is ultimately determined that we did annex a portion of the canal, it could change what areas are contiguous and what are not
Yeah, is that,
potentially.
yeah,
Yeah.
just,
Which means there's might be areas we could annex that if we do have part of the canal, and there might be areas that we would not be able to annex if we do not. Yeah.
I don't know if this complicates things, but I just was reading earlier that apparently Henlopen Acres got half the canal, and we
They only, right.
but we claim the whole canal.
That's a good question. I don't remember how
Well,
that.
that's what it said in the paper.
Is that what it said in the paper?
Yeah.
So, because
Which even complicates it even more.
For sure. I mean, I thought I remembered the legislation saying you could only annex halfway into the canal, the portion that you border. But again, that's one of those things that I think by the time our 5-year update comes around, hopefully we'll have it all clarified, and that's one of the updates we can give. I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah.
Fine. He's going to spend some time in the archives on this one, I think.
All right, very good. No future additional questions on map 3. We'll go to map 4, which I believe,
Is on page 421. This is currently just a copy of the PDF of the city's existing zoning map. Prior discussions indicated a desire to add the map number 4, that type of nomenclature to this. as well as to add a footnote that this map does not reflect the Jones Lane subdivision. So we are incorporating those modifications, but no other changes are proposed to this map itself.
I guess my only comment was from the last meeting, in that I think that page needs to be identified. I don't know if it should say map number 4 on it and anything else on it. Also, I think the way it prints out is portrait. If it was possible to put it on horizontal so that it can be enlarged.
We had this discussion before, and about the municipal complex, and you felt, Solicitor, that it should stay as is, that it not should be a special zone or anything of that nature?
That's the way we've treated it in the past. Again, the theory or the thinking there is that because zoning laws regulate private property, the governmental entity that owns the public spaces is technically exempt from those zoning laws. So to put a zone on it is kind of, it almost would go against, the whole idea of zoning laws. Now, other municipalities do it, so it's not like you're suggesting something that's completely unconventional. But we've always taken the view here that, zoning laws are for private property, not for public, so we'll zone everything private and leave the public unzoned.
Then wouldn't Snyder Candy property be white? We went under that.
We do own that. I don't know the circumstances behind that. If we acquired that at some point after it had been zoned.
No, I'm fine with leaving it alone. Any further comment on map 4? If not, thank you. We'll go to map number 5, Lauren, if you could identify what page it's on.
Or that one is page 4-22.
Map 5, this is the annexation growth area. So different than the future land use, this is just merely identifying what we could consider to annex if those living in that area brought us a petition. Right. We have no intent, and the CDP says we have no intent to go out and actively lobby to annex that area. Any comments?
Just curious on here, we've got the south side of the canal hash there, so is that something we could annex? Is that sort of is that part of the southern portion of annexation there, or?
Well, so I think that the way we've looked at this is because the city boundaries have been shown to include the canal during the past CDPs, we're treating everything as if it is annexed, and that is the actual boundary, and that's why these areas are shown as potential annexation areas.
Got it. Okay.
But why wouldn't this be identified up here?
Because Henlopen Acres only, in their resolution, they only took from here to there
So why wouldn't it be from here to here,
as,
like this?
well, that's showing that nobody has claimed that they've taken any of that. The city has claimed that it's taken all of this, so it's showing.
Already, okay, sorry, clarification. Any further comments on map 5, annexation growth area? If not, we'll go to map number 6.
It should be on page 6-43.
6-43. This is the map on transportation and transit. Look how nice and bright these yellow lines show up. All right, we'll go to map number 7 if there's no comments. Lauren?
Page 6-44.
6-44. This is the pedestrian bicycle facilities map. Oh, no comments. We'll go to map number 8, please.
That is on page 7-29.
7-29. Environmental features map. I find it interesting. I guess, where does this map come from? Because I find it interesting that the Lake Gerard and Silver Lake are identified in total as wetlands versus the blue water.
I think it has both layers, right? And the green just shows up on top. Is that right or no?
Correct. So the blue shows the 100-year floodplain. If you'll, to the right side of the page, the Atlantic Ocean, that is, we made the, more or less the background image that shows up on the map, that blue color, and then the, any waterways also show up with the blue, that lighter blue color. But here, the way that this is currently drawn, that dark blue color shows the 100-year floodplain with the wetlands, the green hatched layer over top of it.
Okay. Any questions? If not, we'll go to map number 9, please.
And that is found on page 7-30.
7-30, this is the coastal inundation map. And if there's no comments on that, we'll go to map number 10, please.
That is on page 7-31.
7-31. This is the Parks and Open Space map. Again, this goes back to our earlier conversation of identifying Silver Lake Park, Stokely Street Park, Cranberry Park, et cetera. So we've got a little homework to do on that. Any additional comments on our maps? The last map I had, well, no, let me think.
I have a question,
Okay, go ahead.
and I'm sorry to go back to map 4, the zoning map. This is probably a very stupid question, but so when we're looking at the municipal building, right, where City Hall is, there's quite a few of commercial lots that are still identified, which looks like to me would be part of City Hall. Is it just not to scale? Is that little white part actually the whole section from one driveway to next to the fire department all the way to where the police drive in and out of? Or
Well, I would say that even if we find a discrepancy on here, this is the map that's approved and signed, and we can't change it or make any corrections without going through a big deal. In terms of what you're asking, I mean, I would have some questions about how the city drive goes. Let's point up there, Evan, to Bad Hair, where Bad Hair Day is, and the road goes through. And you point up on the TV, well, at least for us. Okay, now carry that through to Rehoboth Avenue. See, that seems to be missing something there.
okay.
But again, I don't know.
So
that we
I
can
think the
change
answer is
anything. I
it's
think
just not to
solved.
scale.
No, I believe it
probably-
is. I believe it is.
So this is shown indicating the various parcels. And so the areas where there's an absence of parcels is what is showing up as roadway, or the white areas. So what actually makes up the municipal building, that site appears to include a number of the parcels directly along Rehoboth Avenue. They're just part of that overall, part of this overall complex, as it's shown on the zoning map. If you look at, say, map number 10, for example, the Parks and Open Space map, that shows the county parcels overlaid on top of an aerial. So that may give a better indication of how everything lines up.
Look at you go. I know, right? He's got skills.
Yeah, actually, I think you might be right, because if you look at some of the properties south of the municipal building, white area, the building encroaches, I think, into those lots a little bit.
Right.
Plus, if you look at Steve Elkins Way over there, you've got 2 lots north and 2 lots south that belong to the city also.
So I was just looking for a clarification. My thought was this entire complex was not zoned. And I look at this and it doesn't appear as though that's true.
So if we acquired those lots after they had been zoned, they may still show the zone. I mean, we would have to go through a process of removing the zoning. So my presumption is that those lots perhaps were zoned before the city acquired them and hasn't gone through the process to remove the zoning.
Well, that's why I mentioned Snyder Candy, some property that we owned is not there. Also,
The only thing different about Snyder-
the Scout House also.
The only thing different about those two are typically if the city municipality owns it and it's being used for something other than a municipal purpose, then you do take the time to zone it and require the
Well, the
zoning.
Chamber of Commerce building too, which used to be building and licensing, appears to be zoned.
Right, but I think that's another property that we probably acquired after it had been zoned. Chamber of Commerce is not I mean, it seems like it's a public use, but it's not a municipal use, so it keeps the zoning.
Okay, well,
So at some point, is it worthwhile going back through this with a fine tooth comb and updating it? Because the CDP indicates that it doesn't have any land use issues to be acted on.
Right, I don't think there's any requirement that it be done, but if you're gonna go through the process of redoing the zoning map, which the CDP is requiring, you may want to take the time now to identify those properties that are city-owned but are zoned, and if you want to bring everything into conformity, you would go ahead and remove the zoning from them. Unless in some of the cases like Snyder's where it's not a municipal use being made of the property.
That's, as you dig deeper, I mean,
well,
because,
sorry, I
well,
took us
just
back
for
down this
instance,
path.
the municipal building as it is has is identified in the county tax records. It's got a parcel number. So,
Yeah, it would have a tax parcel numbers because all the parcels have tax numbers even though we're exempt. I guess the zoning issue is if you went ahead and zoned the municipal complex within the C1 commercial zoning district and for some reason you as a body decided you wanted to go higher with another floor because we had some need or whatever, there would be an argument that you'd be subject to the C1 zoning standards. Whereas if you leave it unzoned and keep in mind that it's public property, you're not restricted that way. Although City of Rehoboth Beach has always tried to comply with its own zoning laws.
really?
Pretty much from what
I mean,
Thank you.
it almost appears to me like our water tower is in parcel 10 or 11
that's probably
on
right.
the zoning map. Like, does that mean it's a non-conforming
Well, again, because
on a commercial lot?
because the city owns the land, you can't call it non-conforming because it doesn't have to conform. You can't call it illegal. You can say it doesn't conform to the zoning requirements of the zone in which it sits, but you have to overlay that with the idea that the municipal government is not subject to those zoning laws.
Okay, so even though it may be zoned commercial and the city owns it and is using it for municipal reasons, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right, anything further on the maps? The last map I have is this one, and I understand this one was not going to be included as part of the CDP anyhow, is that correct?
We had provided that, that map for reference for the discussions regarding the neighborhood areas. So I guess one question that I have for you is, would you like us to show, maybe not as a map how these others have been shown, but more as a figure showing all of those neighborhoods in one area so that it's easily identifiable which neighborhood we're discussing, and then we can also overlay if you'll remember back to last week, we had the discussion about the outline of the original city area, and then everything to the north of Rehoboth Avenue would be considered North Rehoboth, everything South Rehoboth. So just some of those, just showing it all on one map, in addition to insets for each particular neighborhood, more as they are shown now. Or we can just forego having that neighborhood overview map and just focus in on the particular neighborhood areas.
I mean, I'd like to have it done. I'd like to do that exercise. However, I don't want it to eat into our time on the CDP. If it's not required to be in the CDP, can we just do it off tap?
So to just get those neighborhood areas updated, we've updated the overall map to show, to basically show that combined overview. And my apologies, I don't have a handout version of that. I have it pulled up on my screen here that I could show to you. It's just a matter of whether you would want that incorporated into the plan or not.
Is it complete? I mean, or?
Can you email it to Evan and or you can't put it on the screen anyhow, can you?
I could.
You don't have Air Media on here yet.
I could pull it up, though.
If it will be all right if I took a screenshot of it and sent it to you, it just takes a while to convert it to a PDF, unfortunately. So if you'll bear with me for one moment. Receiving that momentarily.
is this the hand-drawn one, or this, oh, you've actually played with it a little
This
bit?
is shown, drawn using our GIS system. So here, each of the neighborhoods that we discussed are identified in a different color with the neighborhood name identified. The original city area is designated in that darker hatched, or I'm sorry, dotted line, and the original city call-out. And then just showing that north and south of Rehoboth Avenue is the designation for North Rehoboth and South Rehoboth.
So Lauren, is the question, do we include this instead of having the smaller neighborhood maps in each of those subsections? Is that what you're asking?
Either that or in addition to. My original question was, do we want to show this that is a composite of all of the neighborhood areas shown on one map so that they're more easily referenced and we can better show the original city and North and South Rehoboth designation. So we could either do this in addition to the individual neighborhood maps, just show this, or not show this and only show the individual neighborhood maps.
It's chapter 3, right?
Correct. Those begin on,
3-8,
thank you.
3-9.
I like, if we're going to show the individual neighborhoods, I like showing the compilation also, so you can see the relativeness.
I agree. I'd like to see both.
So are we amenable to doing that? And are we in agreement that we approve of the new neighborhood layouts? Because let's see, every neighborhood now has a new layout to it.
I think we decided at the last meeting that we all came to consensus that this was the mapping that we'd like to see. I mean, including the blank spaces added to wherever we felt appropriate. But Lauren, if you could, then we start off here at page, what is this, 3-8, is it? Or 3-9, but put this map in at the beginning of that, and then maybe some type of text to just say, describing the, not as individual as we have here, but just the concept of the we got 5-6 neighborhoods. Just put it into context of what this really means, what the map means. Neighborhood description based on architectural style or whatever.
So you're really just saying update the wording next to each neighborhood map.
Well, I mean, it would have to be done because some of the descriptions have changed, yes, but an overall just general context of the neighborhoods of Rehoboth are created of, something.
Yes, so that, we are working on the associated text for that, as well as the individual neighborhood descriptions, making sure that the new boundaries are accurately reflected and the other content in those areas are appropriate to the new boundaries. So we'll have that for your next version to review.
I can't see, what did we decide with Olive and Maryland? Is that just North Rehoboth now, or is that?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
and the dotted line is like original
The
city.
historic,
So essentially, the first page of this section would be labeled neighborhoods. The city has historically been composed of 6 distinct areas. This would be the first page showing everything, and then we would go into each one after that. Original city, the Pines, Country Club Estates, South Rehoboth. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Correct. They would just reflect the new or updated language used for the neighborhood names. So instead of the original city, for example, basically the first the parcels on either side of Rehoboth Avenue, running east to west, and then a few blocks north and south as you approach the boardwalk, that is now designated downtown. But there is the black dotted line that designates the original city. So that was how we had discussed it last week to, I guess, better identify the distinct neighborhoods that are currently present.
I'm satisfied with that. I think our next meeting will likely be on Tuesday, the 31st in the morning. Is this something that you can send us all a copy of that map so that we all have an opportunity to look at it? And then in terms of the verbiage on there needing to be updated, you could either send that to all of us or give the first shot to Patrick. Would you mind?
Sure.
We'll overburden you soon, but that way it gets one preview before it comes to us.
Sure.
If that's all right.
So are we, Lauren, is it 7 or 8 now distinct areas that we've identified?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like 7.
There are 7, and we would just, I think there are 7, so those are Country Club Estates, Downtown, Grove Canal, Schoolview, South Rehoboth, The Pines, and Lake Gerard. And so those would be the 7 individual neighborhoods. Then we would, in the overall description, just note that the original city boundary is shown in that black dotted line, and that traditionally or more generally, areas to the north of Rehoboth Avenue are sort of comprehensively known as North Rehoboth, and areas to the south comprehensively are known as South Rehoboth.
I think that's great.
There's no ramifications or unintended consequences of changing neighborhoods. It's not like zip codes are changing. It's not like anything like that.
So we're not calling it the encampment anymore?
What is, I can't read, what is?
Grove
Canal.
/ Canal.
Grove
/ Canal.
Canal.
We can update it to whatever you agree upon.
We'll get it in our hands and let us
Take a look at it,
take a
yeah.
look at it, and we may debate it or
I
question
think
it.
someone was going to consult with Paul Lovett and Nancy Alexander about the name. I thought that's where we left.
Hey, Lauren, did you talk to Nancy? Was she able to?
I haven't had a chance to yet, but I've got that on my to-do list to get back in touch with her and see if we can set up a time.
Just out of curiosity, I wasn't here for that meeting, but did I understand that one of the neighborhoods is Lake Gerard? Hello? Was that a yes or a no, or?
Yeah, if you can-
So I'm just curious, was there a reason that there's no designation of Silver Lake? I just,
it's,
Well, we were in no man's land, I think, with Olive and
That became just North Rehoboth.
Maryland. And then it was going to be North Rehoboth, right?
It reflects this area in general here, this more or less this triangular area, and I will likely modify the coloring just to make it a little bit more, to differentiate a little bit more between the neighborhoods. I think we had discussed both options, and my notes had Lake Gerard as the last named comment, but I could
Right. We
certainly
had Lake
be
Gerard, we had
mistaken.
North Rehoboth, yeah.
Commissioner, it fell in this area where it's not, clearly not the Pines, but it's not in the original area or in the downtown area, which we were considering, Baltimore, Wilmington, Rehoboth Avenue. So we were trying to come up with, to put it somewhere.
I think that makes sense to me.
Or the use of North Rehoboth was considered, but then you've got the whole Pines that's
Yeah.
North Rehoboth too, so it's kind of,
I was just more interested in the correlation that there's no neighborhood entitled Silver Lake. But there is a neighborhood now entitled Lake Gerard.
Is there a place on the map you'd like to put it?
I could like tell you where to put it. Tim. I mean, maybe that's not a relevant question. I'm not sure.
It also came down to what do people actually call themselves too?
Right.
You know, almost, I
Yeah.
think everyone agrees they're in South Rehoboth. I think anyone, even if they're on Silver Lake, will say they live in South Rehoboth.
No, I'm on Silver Lake. I live in Schoolview, which is exactly what that says
You're
now.
in
Yeah.
Schoolview,
So
right.
it makes perfect sense to me. I was just curious if you'd had a discussion about Lake Gerard, Silver
So
Lake.
I asked Joe and Larry, who
Yeah.
live right over by you.
Yeah.
I said, you know, we're trying to figure out school view and what really is included in that. And they said, well, we consider ourselves South Rehoboth, but they're included in school view and on the North Rehoboth cycle for trash.
Yeah, and you ask about consequences? Isn't that one of them? The trash cycle pickup
It
and,
led
yeah,
to a good
Yeah.
portion of our
discussion.
Right.
And we don't need to go back over that. It's just, I was trying to think what are the other, or if they're, y'all are probably.
But that
already-
was, you're right, that was left. It was an unknown, the school and that area, so that was all made school view.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
But it could be Silver Lake.
I think it makes more sense, school view. I'm just,
Because that's a known quantity.
yeah, yeah. I was just curious. Thank you.
thank you. So that ends the discussion
with
on
maps?
chapter 3, right? In terms of the maps.
I don't think there's anything left, is there?
We've got chapter 8 and then chapter 1. And as far as chapter 8, let's just go through it real quick, or hopefully real quick. Chapter 8 is implementation. The very first page, 8-2, makes reference to map 10 and zoning, which,
That's actually map 4.
yeah, we need to make a broad note to just check all the figure numbers and map numbers to make sure that they're proper. Map 10, I think, is actually parks and open space and et cetera. The plan update, first, the last paragraph on the page, first sentence, since the current process resulted in a full update certified in July 2022. Do we make that assumption?
Yes.
So we make the assumption that it is being passed in July 2022. Okay, next page is,
I'm
Oh,
just
go
curious
ahead.
on, I'm sorry, then also the assumption that's 10 years, so we go to 2032? Or I thought, since we've titled this 2020, that the next update should be 2030.
I'm very curious about that myself, that it seems like the opportunity to get back on the regular schedule.
So the state requirements are based on the certification date. So the city has received an extension through July 29th, 2022, which is the last day of July, the last business day of July. So their requirements are that the next full 10-year update be done by July 2032. The 5-year update, interim update, would be in 2027. Now, both of those can occur earlier. They just have to be done by those dates.
So 2025 is not our 5-year then?
Well,
It could be.
per the state requirements, no. However, Should the city wish to complete a, let's call it an interim review in 2025, they can certainly do that. They're just not required by the state to do so until 2027.
But if we turn our work in early, there's no problem.
Correct.
Okay.
So we could do that, and then if we wanted to do 2030, we could.
Correct.
But it has to be done by 2020, or 2032, okay.
Correct.
Any clue as if we turned it or completed it in 2030, would that then set it back to 10 year, 5 and 10 years?
Yes. Mhm. It's all based on the date of adoption or certification. Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to page 8-3.
Wait a minute, I'm not through with
Oh.
8.2.
8.2, go ahead.
I understood everything that was just said, but the way this language reads, it leaves it up to the city to execute an update in 2025 and 2030. And based on our recent performance with meeting deadlines, it seems to me suspect that by the way this language is created, we wouldn't just automatically revert to, oh, that's not due until 2027 and 2032. Because it has an impact when we go a little bit further, I think, to the annual updates and how we really navigate through the annual updates, bringing us to the 5-year and the 10-year. Whether we navigate through them with resolve to get things done, funded, et cetera, or if we have a more relaxed approach for a 5-year and a 10-year that doesn't conclude until 2032. Just seems logical to me with a document dated 2020 Rehoboth Beach Comprehensive Development Plan. If it's up to us what this language says, or maybe Lauren, that's to you. Is it up to us what this language says, or is it up to us to execute how we want this language to be applied?
It is up to the city to determine when you want to do these two reviews, but they have to be done before 2027 and 2032. So if you choose to run them ahead of the state's schedule, that's fine. You just have to have them completed by 27 and 32.
Okay, okay.
But it's up to us to initiate that process.
Could,
Yes, yes, and our track record has been so good recently,
so,
and that's all I'll say about it.
Planning Commission has a big part in that. I mean, they're going to want to be the ones that want to start it sooner than later, I think.
The discussions that we've had with, or I'm sorry, that I've had with the Planning Commission indicate that they are also recommending that the interim update happen in 2025.
Okay.
And that the 10-year review or the 10-year update would be done in 2030. So a prior draft, I can't recall which one, had language in here. It did note the state requirements for completion, but then it had something in there about either a recommendation or something to the effect of the city intends to complete these by 25 and 30. But then they didn't necessarily want to put that specific language in there and have that become problematic for actual implementation. It was a conversation similar to this one, let's say. And ultimately, they opted to leave it as, leave the language in here about what the state requires, knowing that actual city implementation could occur before that.
I understand perfectly what you're saying, and I also understand that that is a very deft way to be able to disregard 2025 and 2030. So,
Would it, for consideration and no decision today, but just something to think about. Solicitor, you had mentioned earlier that we need to do a resolution to approve this or pass this or forward it on. In that text of the resolution, could we suggest or stipulate or what have you that because of COVID, it backed up, and it is the city's intention, the administration's intention, to have a 5-year revision in 2025 and a 10-year revision in 2030 to get back on a cycle, so that there's some direction in case none of us are here in 25 and 30. Thank God.
It's interesting. I suppose in the ordinance of adoption, you could do that. I mean, part of the thing I'm also thinking about is, you know, the state, even though I think we can do it at those earlier times or back on the original schedule, I could see the state also saying, you're 2 years early. We'll see you in a couple of years. I don't think that would happen, you know, but perhaps. The other thing is, I'm always reluctant for, you know, a council or a group of commissioners to say, we're going to put this on the next group of commissioners. They're going to be required to do it in 2025 rather than the schedule that the state's laid out so that they could have till 2027 if for some reason they wanted it. But I think that you could. I think you could. I mean, certainly in the whereas clauses, you could put it in there as sort of a whereas, which just shows your intentions, not actually.
Yeah, the explanation of why it's still or off cycle.
Right. We'll definitely do the explanation of why we're a little bit behind or quite a bit behind. But then it'd just be a matter of whether you want that next whereas clause that says whereas the commissioners have every intention of doing a 5-year update in 2027.
Perhaps in drafting that, you could give us option A and option B.
But as we talk about track record and
Yeah.
and everything, I don't want us to sound like we're beating up on the planning commission either. There were quite a few unforeseen circumstances that made the process longer than it would have otherwise been.
Yeah. I don't disagree at all, but I just think that there's a certain rhythm that, you know, and things will be happening much more quickly in the next few years than they have in the past, so.
well, what I want to avoid, just to be perfectly frank, is when I started asking in 2018, what's the status of the CDP? And was told on numerous occasions, and I don't mind saying this publicly, we've got plenty of time. We've got plenty of time. Well, we all know how how it turned out. So I'm not talking out of school, I'm talking out of experience, that the more we tighten it up, the better chance as all of these seats possibly turn over, we've got a guidepost for people who follow us.
And in general, this is more something to think about as you're preparing for the next update. The adoption process, so the time when the draft gets sent to PLUS and released for public review by the Planning Commission, from that point until the adoption by the mayor and commissioners, that is typically a 4 to 6 month process, or I like to assume it's a 4 to 6 month process. When I'm trying to lay out a schedule for a full update, I like to plan on 18 to 24 months for that to occur, including that 6-month adoption process. Now, of course, this is barring another worldwide pandemic. You know, I'm, you know, knock on wood, we won't have another one of those again, but typically I think a 2-year period, 18-month to 2-year period would provide sufficient time to have outreach, do the technical work on the backside to get the document updated, the analysis, do the review, get through review by PLUS, whatnot, and hopefully provide a little leeway for any unanticipated events that may come up.
Anything else on 8.2? All right, thank you. We'll go to 8.3, the very first sentence. indicates the required annual comprehensive plan implementation status report. I suggest we put in there to be authored by the Planning Commission or generated by the Planning Commission, just so we identify for the reader who is actually creating that annual implementation status report. Required annual comprehensive implementation status report to be authored by the Planning Commission must be completed and submitted to the Office of State Planning, et cetera. The rest of it, I have given a lot of thought to the third paragraph on the implementation strategy workshop, which I agree. I think it's a great plan. However, I think the number of participants in that is top-heavy for me. That could create 20, 24 people at a meeting. And so I would suggest that implementation strategy workshop not have the entirety of the Planning Commission there, but instead has the Planning Commission chair there, and then the mayor and commissioners, city manager, pertinent city committee chairs. They're already the Board of Commissioners. So I would wordsmith this, I guess. And then city staff would be there. So I would like to consider changing that paragraph for the CDP to be effective. It is imperative the Planning Commission chair, mayor and commissioners, city manager, and city staff hold an implementation strategy workshop, which will provide an opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. I did talk with the Planning Commission chair this morning, and he didn't give a nod of approval or not, but because he didn't want, frankly, he didn't want to without consulting his Planning Commission members. But he understands my need, and I talked about, doesn't mean the Planning Commission can't have input, but I suggested that that one meeting is just going to be too many people at a meeting, and that they could consider conducting their own meetings and making a presentation to the commissioners on what they think some of the priorities. After all, it is us, the commissioners, the elected officials, that have to consider what the priorities are and how to use funding and what to fund. So that's my philosophy there. So with that, I would commensurately say this last paragraph should probably be changed to the mayor and commissioners, city manager, and appropriate city staff would meet publicly every year after the workshop to discuss available resources and funding, et cetera.
So, Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
going back to the fourth line of the third paragraph, where it talks about that meeting would start the annual budget process.
Well, it says the implementation strategy workshop to discuss priorities for the upcoming year prior to the start of the annual budget
Right.
shop. So we need to take a look at the calendar and pencil in there when is that going to happen to allow us sufficient time to create those priorities, or at least the draft priorities, so that we can ask city managers to start doing the budget. And then when we get into the budget, we start saying, that may even cause us to rearrange some priorities.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Did you foresee this potentially transforming the budget cycle? It read that way to me.
Just, I would say our budget cycle is what it is. We need to react soon enough prior to that.
I think we're on the same page, because I think this front loads a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And would be a great enhancement.
Yeah.
But others may not. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Just your first comment there in the annual comprehensive plan and status report, has that previously been done by the mayor or the city manager, or by whom?
That is the charge of the Planning Commission, I believe. I don't, right? That's their charge to do an annual report.
But
Do you know anything more about that?
Coincidentally, the city just received,
that's-
received this notification from state planning that this was something to start thinking about. So Evan forwarded me the document itself.
I forwarded it to you, I think.
So ultimately, we have to include the names of the mayor, city manager, various positions, and all of the mayor and commissioners, as well as all of the planning commission members. It does say that at the very bottom, it asks for the mayor's signature and printed name. So with the phrase "on behalf of the town," in this case, City of Rehoboth Beach, I respectfully submit this comprehensive plan annual report to the Office of State Planning Coordination. So typically, how I've seen this in other jurisdictions is the Planning Commission, for example, would develop the report, and then once they're satisfied with what's included, they would transmit it for your review. And then once you're satisfied, the mayor would sign that report, and that would get forwarded on to state planning.
And Lauren, I'm sorry, did I miss, when is that due?
It is due July 1st.
For some reason, I remember that was like a one-page letter done on an annual basis, signed by the mayor. Is that, Ann, could you help me remember that? Is that?
It's the same thing.
Same thing? Okay.
Yeah, the planning commission looks at it, and there's a few questions, items that they need to, speak to. And once they're finished with it, then it goes on to the mayor for him to sign, so it goes back up to the state.
Isn't it primary function to alert the governor as to what things we have accomplished in the CDP?
What's been accomplished, what's intended for the upcoming year, basic status of the implementation items contained in the plan, any planning issues that the municipality is currently facing, and if you anticipate any changes related to the comprehensive plan. So if you anticipate a comp plan amendment, and then a new question for this year asks for the identification of any resiliency-related projects that may arise throughout the year. And this, they note that the potential for this, should funding or technical assistance become available, they would look to this as an example of the projects that could be considered.
And this is all in response to the action items, is that correct? From each chapter?
Yes, however, if there is, something that's done outside of that, that you want to highlight that the city has done, that can certainly be included here. But it is primarily related to what's found in the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Anything else on 8.3? We'll go to 8.4.
Yeah, Mayor.
Oh, go ahead.
Related to your, I'm sorry, I just want to be clear. So the initial implementation strategy workshop happens, and then on an annual basis, the Planning Commission is having a session for the annual review. And then it's your intention that paragraph 4 is that then the mayor and commissioners have a meeting after the Planning Commission workshop meeting to specifically talk about budget and grant opportunities, et cetera, for the upcoming year?
Similar. The Planning Commission is going to meet annually to talk about the implementation status report and get that filed. Then on an annual basis, the implementation strategy workshop conducted by the Planning Commission Chair, Mayor, and Commissioners, City Manager, City staff, hold that implementation strategy workshop. And that has to be done prior to the budget. But then it says after that strategy session is done, at some point, the mayor and commissioners, city manager, et cetera, get together to discuss funding. Now, it doesn't say whether that could be incorporated into the budget talks, but it very well could be.
Right.
Rather than segregated. So the planning commission still gets their opportunity to critique, analyze, advise, not just the state, but advise the commissioners what is accomplished and what isn't. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. 8-4.
I've got one question on this one. It talks about, on the first section, financial planning, and, spells out the capital improvement planning that we have. We currently do a 5-year capital improvement plan. Should that be specified here? I mean, some places can do a 2-year capital improvement plan, or, some can have a 10-year. What we currently have established, should that be outlined? Lauren, is it for other municipalities, or?
I think 5 years is the typical timeframe. I think it just depends the terminology that's used. So like the state, for example, what is in essence their capital improvement plan for DelDOT just has a different terminology that they use. That's sort of beside the point, but we can certainly indicate the last bullet there is capital improvement planning. We can make a reference to the 5-year cycle or 5-year outlook for the CIP.
Why not just change it, the bullet to 5-year capital improvement planning or something? I don't remember, the previous CDP indicated establish a 5-year capital improvement program. So I don't know if that's still in here somewhere. I can't remember every word in here, but maybe we can find that and see if it can be repeated here. And if not, again, I'd be satisfied with 5-year capital improvement planning.
All right, thank you.
Ed, anything?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right. That's 8-4.
Question on 8-4, you have something, Stan?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
All the operational action items, Lauren, if you could give us some direction on this, they seem to kind of all, or many of them, focus around the zoning map and county parcel datas. Is this any sense of priorities or order of what needs to be done, or timing in which these should be accomplished?
They're not in a priority order. These were items that were discussed and identified as things that should be done. Some of them have particular action items in say, for example, Chapter 4, the land use chapter. The only item that has a defined timeline is to review the official zoning map for consistency with the future land use within 18 months. Otherwise, these are more best practices, if you will, to make various processes a little easier in the long term, but to standardize or streamline the way some of these various maps or other processes are completed, if that makes sense.
Lauren, do any of these specifically address the issues that we've experienced in this process with the mapping issues with the county. And I mean, I think that held us up a lot. So I want to make sure that whatever held us, I wasn't involved in that process, but I want to ensure that whatever that problem was, we address so it doesn't happen in the future.
Well, look at bullet number 4 under operational action items.
Yep.
Finalize CDP's partial discrepancy research around the lakes and beach, provide proper documentation to the county mapping department for consideration of corrective action with sufficient evidentiary documentation. So it's on there, and I think we are attentive to it and need to make sure we resolve it, because it is truly unresolved, totally. Yeah. Correct? Evan? Yeah.
So Mayor, in that example, how do we think about, if you ask the question on this bullet that you just pointed us to, who is the point person? Who is the accountable person? Or am I getting
I don't have an
ahead?
answer right now, but I
Okay.
think what I'm trying to think about, as soon as this, and I'm actually giving it thought before we adopt it, but we need to have this implementation strategy workshop. I think it's going to be jam-packed with a lot of information, and it's not going to be, to me, it's not going to be just one meeting. It's probably going to be multiple meetings, so that we can prioritize things and then and maybe assign tasks or something so that things don't get lost. So there's, I think, still a lot of homework that will need to be done.
Okay.
And, and maybe there's something that comes in that, during that meeting, whatever, but something that is not addressed in here, and I don't know whether it's appropriate time or not, but we all know the county is doing reassessments, and will be coming into the city to reassess the lands. Is that a useful tool for us, that, you know, that data is being developed or revised, and should it be mentioned in here that that data could be made available to us, and, you know, it's not, the money's already spent kind of a thing, or I just don't know if this is the place to address it, or as you talked about, the implementation meeting, but.
I don't know, Glenn. You know, I've attended a couple seminars on the county reassessment. They, of course, have not addressed anything specific to Rehoboth or anything, but, you know, they go in and they take their own data and their lot lines. So if there's a discrepancy between their lot lines and deed description and what we have, they don't care. They're not going to do anything. They're going to reassess based on their own information. So does their information really help us? I know in the end, we need to have a discussion about the reassessment, because it's a lot cheaper for us to buy their records and use their assessments than for us to continuing doing it our way. But do you have any?
Well, I guess the one thing to think about is, as the reassessment process happens, there's also an appeals process. And it might be worthwhile to get out to our residents that if you disagree with how the county assesses you, go through that appellate process, because there may come a time where the city says we're adopting the county's records, and that's your opportunity, you know, your initial opportunity at least, to have your day before county council to appeal and try and get it changed to something that you think is, I guess if you encourage people to go through that process, then if at some point we as a city, you as commissioners adopt those records, you know, you're kind of able to say you got in front of it, you let people know, and it was an opportunity for them to go through the appellate process. But no, mayors, as they go through the appeals process, they're not going to care what the assessment process, they're not going to be concerned about what our city records show.
And just FYI, I can't remember the time frame, but this is a multi-year project for the county. And it could be another year before they come into Rehoboth. And I'd like to see if I could get them, prior to coming into Rehoboth, to come and talk with us, explain the process and everything. So that'd be a good time also to interact with them and ask questions.
Should that be a part of the CDP, though? I mean.
Mention of county reassessment
Yeah.
or?
I mean, again, this is,
Yeah,
I don't know, it's an opportunity for us to use existing data or more recent data, maybe more accurate data, maybe not. I just asked the question because it's an opportunity. Lauren, have you had any, thoughts in other municipalities in the state, since the whole state's reassessing county-wise?
We haven't addressed that particular item in other projects that we've worked on within the state. But that being said, the other comprehensive plans that we have worked on have not aligned quite the same with the city of Rehoboth. So timing-wise, it's off and probably wouldn't have made it into those plans anyway.
Something you maybe could look into, or just,
Yeah, I can see how some other places may or may not be addressing it. I think if we did include something, the most appropriate place would if we're going to talk about the potential impacts or whatnot, would likely be in Chapter 5 that discusses housing and economic development. But, I mean, with that, that's something that we can consider, but I can certainly look into.
I think it's relevant because this is, I think, the first time that the county has done assessments in a very long time.
Yeah.
And when we adopt, if we choose to buy their information rather than doing our own assessments, I mean, that too is going to have, not only is going to have an impact on our residents from a county tax perspective, it's going to have a huge impact from our own tax revenue perspective as well, if we adopt those land values, which are now being assessed at a time when they're the highest they've ever been.
I don't know that it affects our tax revenue because I think we have the ability to set a tax that equals the total revenue that we get.
Correct.
So that, want to be accurate in that. Well, then you'll do some research and we can bring this up again at the next meeting.
Thank
And you can give some thought, Glenn, as to whether we should be mentioning the county's reassessment and what kind of ramifications might be for us. 8.4, anything else on 8.4, operational action items? The review of the city zoning map for consistency with the CDP's future land use map, ensuring consistency within 18 months. Somewhere in here, it mentions that there are no land use issues, therefore, there's nothing that has to be done within the 18 months. I just want to double check there, because there are lots of places where it says, consider a mixed-use zone, consider something zone, consider. I want to make sure that that can't be construed by the state, or is construed by the state, as a zoning issue that must fall within the 18 months requirement.
So I think it's pretty clear that when he says consider, it's not one of those requirements. And specifically now that it's left out of the action items, it's not one of the requirements. But recall, there was language in a former CDP that upfront kind of made clear that things that say shall or that are put in action item lists, those are things that this plan intends the city to act upon. Everything else is aspirational or suggestive, and that language, though, is not any longer in this draft plan.
Aspirational, okay, all right. I would, before I forget it, I'd like you to draft a preface on behalf of the mayor commissioners for the CDP. Go ahead, Ed.
I'm sorry, are you finished with this chapter?
No,
okay.
wait, 8.4, 8.5, anything on 8.5?
I guess, can I just ask Lauren
Yeah.
a general question? So we have made, just even today alone, we've made changes to some of these chapter action items. You will incorporate those not only in this section, but in this chapter 8 as well?
Correct. Any changes that are made to the goals or action items in the topic chapters within chapter 1 or chapter 8, we will make sure that they're all consistent between those 3 areas.
Very good, very good. Now, I've got a comment from Susan Gay to read at one time about chapter 8, but let's go through the,
I was just gonna say, but haven't we already reviewed all of these in the separate chapters? So
yeah,
that those-
I've just got some wordsmithing thing, that's all. So anything on 8.5? 8.6 is just under N. There's an extra with there. Seek to increase communication and collaboration with community organizations to promote and host inclusionary events for the community. There's an extra with there. And I'm sorry, forgive me, on 8.5, items 6 and 7, I don't remember these. Maybe they were already in there. So if they were, I'll withdraw this question. But item 6, promote and provide appropriate support for the arts, culture, and historical resources of the city. And number 7, protect, enhance, and expand the benefit of cultural resources for future generations. Can somebody just do me a 2-sentence explanation of those? Page 8.5, 6 and 7.
Those were not in the previous CDP, but because we have this chapter on chapter 3 that discusses community character and profile, the Planning Commission felt that it would be appropriate to include goals related to related more toward those items, in this case, those arts, culture, historic resources. So these are what these are the language that they had proposed.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I was maybe just going to add in that number 6, health and safety in addition. And the only reason why I say that, I'll give one example, is our HRC Municipal Equality Index is not as high as it could be. And one of the reasons is that unlike other larger municipalities, we don't provide STD testing, suicide hotline, other things for LGBTQ youth and adults. And one thing that we could do to increase that rating as the city helping provide those types of services is through our website, our calendar is promoting what Camp Rehoboth already does with some of their youth counseling programs, with some of their testing sites, et cetera. And so that's one way that we could accomplish that without us financially doing it, is just supporting what a local organization is already doing through communication, putting it on our websites, et cetera. So that's one example where I kind of feel like it could fall in this category. But it's not arts, culture, or historic.
Thought there might already be a place in here for that, somewhere. You want to think of a paragraph or a sentence to, not write this down, but for the next meeting, to
Sure.
bring that forward? I'm interested in how you do it, because again, camp already provides all those things, so we would just be directing people to their website or something.
Correct, yeah.
All right, thank you. 8.6, 8.7. Goal number 2. I gave pause to the use of the word continue to work with neighboring municipalities versus just work with neighboring municipalities. I don't know. Because we really have not been working with anybody. So I'm not sure we're continuing to do anything, but, here's number 5, consider adopting a new mixed use. So that's just reinforcing what I said. D, consider rezoning again. So we've addressed that. 8.8. Again, most of these we've already been over. 8.9. K, we've already addressed. Freebie and Jolly Trolley, some of these other things. Again, I'm just going to emphasize it every once in a while. D, at the very bottom, transportation, consider and provide comment to Sussex County on pending land development applications. That's something new, and it would be kind of a challenge, but I think it's worthwhile. Study page 810, assuming that has to do with sidewalks contract. Just want to let you know that under action item M, near the bottom, coordinate with Delaware Solid Waste Authority to resume household hazardous waste collection with the city. I directed Evan, and he's already looking into that. They need a particularly big area to do that. And so we're looking into options in addition to out here, but they always do those events now in threefold: household hazardous waste, electronics, paper shredding? Yes. And paper shredding. So you even need a more expansive area than we used to in the old days when we did household hazard. But we're looking into that. The earliest we can make it happen is for next spring. So that is good news that we're looking at. And I'm also working on that also. So now the P and the Q, prepare a citywide stormwater management plan. And Q, I think I put down they're already underway, but that doesn't mean we can't memorialize them here. 8.11. Well, we just went over a lot of these things today, so just any... J, I put identify additional appropriate locations because we've already got some. And then K, adopt standards for dark sky dash like lighting to mimic. Again, you're probably going to capture that anyhow when you change it, so I'll leave that alone. 8.12. L, we divided into 2 sections, so you should be able to capture that and some others. Any other comments on Chapter 8? I'd like to read something from Susan Gay. Now, granted, our next thing is to review Chapter 1, executive summary, and those should be a lot of things that are repetitive also, right? Because it's summarizing, so that should go fairly quickly. But what I'd like to do before we run out of time is share something with Susan Gay. She had to leave. One comment I was going to make about Chapter 8 and/or 1, Chapter 1, that I hope you'll bring up in my absence. The goals and action items appear verbatim in 3 separate places in the CDP. In Chapter 1, at the end of each chapter of 3 to 7, and in Chapter 8. She says she believes that's too much redundancy and she'd like to consider reducing that somehow. One idea would be to leave the introductory parts of Chapter 8 about the implementation process, very important information, as well as the operational action items on page 8-4, which I don't think are specifically listed elsewhere. But then in that chapter 8, in the middle of pages 8-5, after these sentences with edits, it says the following section identifies, and she said just change it to areas of improvement and lists of the goals and action items can be found in each CDP chapters 3-7 for future consideration. Related visions and city positions can be found in chapter 1, executive summary and vision. The list could also be removed from chapter 1, but I do not feel as strongly about that. Maybe it's okay to have them listed twice, but 3 times she says it's too many. I can forward this to everybody. She just shared it with Patrick and I as she left and went home today, but she wanted to share that. So
Is there a good reason why it's listed 3 times?
So we initially have them in each chapter so that each chapter can be looked at sort of as a cohesive unit. And then we had included them in the implementation chapter so that if you're looking at what the, basically what the city's to-do list would be, you have one chapter that you can pull it out, everything is listed there to check off or whatnot. Subsequently, the Planning Commission asked that they be added to Chapter 1. Previously, that chapter ended after the discussion of city positions, so it did not include the action items. A version after that just included the goals, and then ultimately it morphed into including all of the goals and action items from each chapter in that location. So that was sort of the iteration of how that occurred.
I thought the repetition of this information was the most valuable part to me. And I could defend that from a communication standpoint. In my opinion, that when you tell people something and you reinforce it over and over again, and they do not have to try to find it in some other location in the report, it is much more likely to stick with someone through easily accessible language so that they understand the seriousness of the document and what they are supposed to be doing. So I would lobby long and hard that this is a very powerful way to present information.
oh, no comment, then we're going to leave it alone then.
Yeah, yes, I mean, there's an old adage about in communications, tell people what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you just told them.
Yep.
If I can go either way on this. If I was going to remove some of the repetitiveness, it would be in the executive summary and vision, because this is no longer a summary, chapter 1. I mean, it's giving you everything. I'm not in favor of taking out chapter 8, because that is the implementation. If you were going to say, oh, what do I need to execute this document, you're going to go to that chapter, pull it out. Obviously, it should be in each one of the sections that it's being discussed. So if I was going to remove the repetitiveness, it would be in section 1 after the key positions, in my opinion. But I can go either way.
I hear what you're saying, but when I first got all of these pages to look at, the first 2 chapters after I looked at the index that I pulled out were the executive summary and the implementation plan. That if you wanted to say to another community or to a group of executives, which I consider this team, those are the 2 things that you need to say, what am I supposed to be doing and how am I going to get from point A to point B? I don't need the rest of this document from an executive 100,000 foot level. So that's why I would continue to lobby that it's so much easier. The information is already there, and it just serves it up to you rather than you go hunting for it and looking for it.
Yeah, this is one case where I think the redundancy, I'm fine with. Yeah.
Can
Sorry, Susan.
I ask a process question? Right, so we've got things being repeated essentially 3 times. Are there macros in your system? So if you're changing the goals or action items in chapter 3, is it automatically feeding those changes into section 1 and 8, or is this a very manual process?
This is currently a pretty manual process. Initially, when we were structuring these, we basically copy and pasted from one section into another. At this point, because there are more minor changes in the, meaning that it's changing a word here or there or tweaking something, we're just, making that change in those 3 locations, but
That's what I worry about most on a document where you've got it being repeated 3 times. It's just it says one thing on one section and something different. And I think you're right. The changes are minor enough. I think there was 1 bullet point today that we're turning into 2 bullet points. It's not. I don't think there's too many changes, but that's my pet peeve. Is I don't like minor differences, when they should be the same. And
I'll make sure to look at that in particular and make sure that all 3 areas align between those 3.
I'm going to go through these in under 6 minutes. So if you need to stop me for something, obviously speak up, but
Is this the executive summary you're
Chapter 1, Executive Summary, page 1-2, 1-3, 1-4.
Oh, I have 1-3, I'm sorry. Last paragraph, we talk about 3rd line down, libraries, senior facilities, places of worship, medical facilities. There was like Dock in a Box going to open on Rehoboth Avenue, but it never has. The space is for lease again. So I don't know if we have no medical facilities in town.
Did that ever open? I don't think it did.
We have a dermabrasion cosmetologist person out by the circle, but the Dock in a Box, as I call it, never did open.
Well, where is that on the page 1-3?
The last paragraph, 3rd line down.
And I just would like to point out that these are visions, so this is where
Yeah.
we'd like to see the city and in a future period in time. So not necessarily what the existing conditions reflect.
All right.
I'm sorry. What page are you on?
1-5.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we just go back to vision, page 1-3, middle of the page, a vision for city character. It's talking about
Talking about the first paragraph of vision or the second paragraph?
the second. So it talks about residents, property owners, and tourists. They may be. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So the last sentence in that paragraph says responses to surveys of city stakeholders, and there it says residents, businesses, and visitors. But I didn't see property owners. But I guess that is only referring to a survey that was sent out. And I imagine that it went out to non-resident property owners as well. That may be an oversight.
I'm not sure offhand how the survey was administered, but there were part of the responses allowed the respondent to indicate whether they owned property, et cetera.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry. I read it quickly, and it's only referring to a survey, but in the beginning of the paragraph, it talks about the character including property owners as well as residents. I'm fine. You can ignore my comment on that.
All right, that's 1-5.
I'm sorry, back up to 1-4 for a quick second. Not going to make it. But just on the second, or the first full paragraph under neighborhoods, Lauren, perhaps that's where you could capture text for the neighborhood map, the general map, because it talks about residential areas continue to reflect small towns. When we depict all the neighborhoods, the new map you're going to add. And then also it says, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like the sixth line down, it says it's 6 distinct neighborhoods. I don't know how many we've ended up with, but I don't think it's 6 anymore.
Yeah, we have 7 now, yeah.
Yeah.
Now 4-5, 1-5, 1-6.
I'm just looking at on 1-6, I'm looking at position on housing growth, and in the last paragraph there, it talks about communication and coordination with the county and neighboring jurisdictions, which today in a few areas we've talked about coordination or communication with the county. Overall, I don't know this for sure, but I thought at one time Lewis at least had a county liaison on their city council or within their staff. Do other municipalities have a liaison with the county? And I guess, why don't we? Should we?
I don't think we have a formal position. I think the mayor, is in touch with the county. But, to fulfill some of these items in here, we would probably have to establish a liaison so that they know that they're to monitor things and report back to the commissioners, and then take what the commissioners will point and report back to the county. I go to Sussex County Associations of dinners and breakfast meetings and stuff where the county is often there. And so I talk with them with frequency, but I'm not targeting anything in particular.
Yeah.
I do recall too, Mayor, that at one point the Association of Coastal Towns had a representative from Sussex County. Usually it would be Todd Lawson. And I think a council member would attend too, just to speak on behalf of the county and update the mayors on.
Yeah, not a member of ACT, but.
Correct.
But there to represent the county, yeah.
Well, I think at the end of this process, just something to keep in mind as we're doing that implementation strategy session, I think now more than ever, with especially just, I know everyone that I know in town complains to me about the overdevelopment of Sussex County, the lack of infrastructure. What can we do? And it's like, you can vote in your county elections, you can go to county meetings. But I think now if there's a time to identify more of a long-term coordination and strategy with the county, we need to start identifying key people that have responsibilities to coordinate and communicate. So just.
Very good, thank you. 1-6, 1-7, 1-8, 1-9, 1-10.
On 110, just an action items A, review the city zoning map for consistency with comprehensive plans, future land use map, in accordance applicable. That doesn't fall under that time frame of the 18 months with zoning map or zoning changes or coordination.
It does,
That
and
one
it is
does.
referenced as such in some other place.
Okay.
That's where that note about consistency in 3 places. 111, 112. The only note I had on 112 was the H at the very bottom. I like that word consider. I said, consider contracting with a professional traffic engineer rather than saying contracting. Page 113, 114, 115, and 116. Give yourself a pat on the back. We did a lot today. Wanted to address a couple things. One is I'd like to make note that since this is a separate meeting, there was no correspondence identified for the second meeting. Also like to review, Lauren, as far as any changes that we've noted today or in the past, do any of them rise to the point where we would need to resubmit to Plus?
I don't believe so. I think they've all been either updating a factual nature or discussing a project or something like that, and changes to the actual goals or action items have been relatively minor. So I don't believe anything would rise to that level.
Well, that's good news. That way we don't have to rush to get something resubmitted to Plus at the state on or before June 1st. So it takes a little pressure off us. Even though we have to adopt by ordinance the CDP on or before July 29th, I'd still like to proceed as expeditiously as we're comfortable with toward public hearing and adopting the ordinance, et cetera, so that we could get it out of our hands and into the hands of the state sooner than later, and not waiting to the last minute.
Mayor, just
yeah.
to follow up on that. So Mayor, you said, Lauren, you said you don't believe so. Is that definitive, or who's the deciding factor on if something needs to go back before the state or not?
Ultimately, it would be the Office of State Planning. The more of the substantive changes that have been made are in response to a comment that we received from Plus. I'll go back through and just confirm that we can either relate any of these changes to a Plus comment, an original Plus comment, or that they are minor wordsmithing type. And if there's any questions that arise, I can just confirm with state planning that they wouldn't consider it at a level that would need additional review.
That's a good point. We need that as a formal process, because our next meeting date would be Tuesday, a week from today, May 31st. And June 1st, the very next day, is when we would have to submit something to Plus. So I need to charge you with definitively finding out if anything causes us to rise to the level of needing to send it back to the Plus. If that means contacting them, so be it. But if you would do that and converse with me, let me know the results, because that would be a big deal if we did have to do that. I'm hoping not. And I'm also said before, and I'll reiterate, that if something causes us to rise to that level, I would consider, if it's not a requirement, taking it out of the CDP so that we don't have to. So that may resolve it anyhow, but that should be up to everybody. So you'll be back in touch with me soon on that. Glenn, you're going to do a preface for the mayor and commissioners. The next meeting, I have to post agendas today for our next mayor and commissioners CDP meeting to be on May 31st. Ann has drafted two agendas, one for 9 a.m. and one for 2 p.m. I don't know whether the wisest thing would be to post two of them, and then we can always cancel the second one. I'm hoping we can get everything done in the first meeting. And even if we had to extend the first meeting till 1 o'clock so that we could cancel the second meeting, I'd be amenable to that. And then I would also have I want to probably modify the agenda so that we have the opportunity to vote on adopting the resolution, you think?
Mayor, just let me ask, in the next Tuesday meeting on this, are you envisioning we would go back through all these chapters page by page by page?
I don't intend to. I would put the onus on each commissioner.
Yes.
That if they have an individual page, that, we'll start at the beginning to end, but just if you have something, bring it forward. Otherwise, we're going to skip. If nobody has anything on chapter 1, then that's it. We're going to go to the next one. And
So the expectation on that Tuesday meeting is that we would, plenty of time beforehand, we would have a new draft with track changes, identify anything else that we have And assuming that we don't have any major changes, we would then adopt a resolution to set a public hearing.
We would then consider adoption of a resolution.
But I think we're way past thinking that we can insert changes. Don't you? I mean, what I would expect, Lauren, is a,
No, I think we have the opportunity to put something in there.
I don't think
but
that's good
I don't
management of
think-
time.
Well, I
That
don't,
on the day before, if somebody wants to bring up something that has not been brought up before,
day-
that seems,
but the day before what?
I thought you said we have one day before the plus.
We do, but the chances of having to go to plus, I say, are almost nil.
Okay,
Because again, I'm willing to withdraw it.
okay.
I don't think there's an appetite for anyone to insert something
That we haven't
that
talked
we
about.
would have to go to plus.
Yeah, I would say most likely it's an omission or a wordsmith or
Okay.
something
Or
like that.
clarification.
But that would be the goal. So again, should I go ahead and, out of caution, post the notice for both meetings, and then we can cancel the second one?
So what will we do? We're just going, if, in case there's something, is that all the meetings for on Tuesday?
Well, we've got the neighborhood map to look at, and we've got some of these changes. We want the opportunity for all of us to review the version 8. And one of the things that we could all check on ourselves is, do the 3 iterations of the action items all marry and come, are they all equal? And again, it's just the opportunity to bring forward, get it resolved, and then we adopt version 8 with the 10 changes that came up during the meeting. And we're ready to take that to public hearing so that we have something to put in front of the public.
I would just, for me personally, I would ask that if what we're getting is the next version 8 is what I think is pretty much the final version, it would be very helpful for me if we could get a paper copy of that final draft. I do best when I'm looking and trying to reference check to do that on paper and not on the computer. So if we could get that in paper
Well,
form.
who would like a paper copy? Not you, you,
I would.
I would.
you.
I have
So-
one now.
so
It's
we'll
been
get-
very easy to
So
work
we'll get
through it.
everybody a paper copy. Yeah, okay, that'll work.
Otherwise, I'm going to start billing the city for my ink and paper. And
I thought you use your computer very
I
well.
do, but
I ran out of my ink.
when you're referring and going back and forth to different chapters and
right.
stuff, I need to do that in
Yep,
paper.
we'll do that. So that puts a time constraint on you. If we're meeting on the 31st, we need them ideally Friday. What do you think your time?
Is that a tough day? Is that the day after Memorial Day? Or am I?
Yeah, so that even cuts us off. Yeah, because we're closed Memorial Day.
If I could get that draft number 8 to you Friday morning, would that give you enough time for the hard copies?
That would give us time to process it, make copies, allow you all to pick it up over the weekend or on Friday afternoon.
A big party weekend. I don't know if I'm going to have time to.
Can you do his in,
Get a grip on yourself.
can you do his in big print?
I think it would go better with
Friday
a
morning
cocktails.
is great.
There's an audio version, Ed. You can.
Podcast.
So similarly, as we have in the past, we'll provide the PDF of the clean PDF that reflects what it would look like with all the changes accepted. We'll provide a track changes version so you can see where changes have been made. And if you would also like the documents in Word that you can toggle between a track changes version and a clean or final version, we can provide that as well, as we have in the past.
Do you all want the Word version as well as the PDF? I only print out the PDF, because if I were doing a red line, I would
If you
want
have
the
them,
word.
I think just having them is fine.
Okay.
So which version will we be getting as a print document?
Version 8.
I know.
That
but
is the.
Is it the track changes? Is it the clean final? What is it?
Oh,
That's what I'm asking.
Up to you.
Pick one.
I don't want both of them, so.
I would prefer, because of we're doing one side, we're doing color, I would prefer to just give you a final version 8, period. And then electronically, you can go back through the versions and look at the red line
Yeah,
and track.
I agree.
Would that be all right?
Fine by me.
Be all right? Okay. Very good, very good. Go to the order. Anything else?
I just wanted to say I had not worked face-to-face with Lauren before, and I think she brings a great deal of value. And that's why you have a good, experienced consultant to guide us through all this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Very good. Thank you. If there's nothing else, I'll adjourn this meeting at 4:13 PM. Thank you very much. We'll see you next Tuesday, the 31st at 9 AM.